Daxton.
Oh, integrated, yeah. That was a pain.
Ashton.
I understood it well, it's just, I don't know. Take it back to this, just big stuff.
I'm working on
All right. Good morning, guys. I am happy to be back. I didn't realize we're going to be on short periods here, so I kind of cut back a little bit of what I said we would look at today. But first, just so y'all didn't think I was ditching on you, what happened to me and why I disappeared for a while. So we had that week of snow, and then Saturday night, right before we came back, or before y'all came back, I was throwing up all night. At some point in the night, I realized my stomach hurt. Didn't get better by the morning, so I went to the ER, and I needed my appendix taken out. So Sunday, they took my appendix out, and that's like a very minor surgery. It's supposed to be like 4 to 7 days for recovery. So the first week I missed, I was at home recovering from that, and I thought I was a couple days away from feeling normal and being back. But around day 5, 6, 7, I realized I wasn't getting better, and I had a lot of pressure in my stomach. So I went back to the ER last Monday, and it turned out that I had a complication from my surgery where I was bleeding inside a little bit, and it created a blood abscess. So all that extra pressure was just pushing on my stuff. So that was very uncomfortable, and so they drained that stuff out of me. I still have a drain in me right now to get the last little bits, hopefully. They kept me in the hospital a few days, and 3 days, and then I would have been back on Monday, but I had my checkup appointment, and I was hoping to get my drain taken out. So it was just, I thought I was recovering, and I wasn't, so it turned from a 1-week thing into a 2-week thing. So, fair warning, I'm going to show you how much blood they took out of me, and it's kind of gross, so you don't have to look. If you want to close your eyes for a second, I will tell you when it's safe. But I will show in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that's how much blood they took out of me when I first went to the hospital. So literally everything hurt. Sneezing, coughing, any abdominal movement. There was no room for anything. So that's why I ended up going back to the hospital the second time. And I wish I had just gone back sooner, but I thought I was just sore and recovering from the appendix surgery. So that's how it kind of dragged out so many days. So I apologize for not being here. As much as I wanted to be here, I just physically, it was just impossible. So I could have maybe crawled to the classroom, but I would have been of no use to you guys. So anyway, so I was sharing with you the last couple of BC topics. So hopefully you guys at least worked through those until you saw where you got stumped or figured out which questions you needed the most help with, so that this is a little smoother transition. I know the first lesson that I missed with you guys was not 10.14, but I feel like 10.14 and 10.15 just kind of flow together. So those are going to be the first two that I want you to look back at. So on the desk up front, I made you a hard copy. Again, I hope that you started or did the whole assignment on notebook paper. You don't have to copy the notebook paper stuff to the hard copy. I just wanted you to have it. If you prefer to copy it over, that's great. But I just thought that that would be helpful for you. So if nothing else, just throw it in your binder. So my goal here is, partly because I missed so much, I do want to try to give you guys some small assessments, some more manageable size stuff, but we'll see what kind of questions you guys had from this. So in section 10.14, it really boiled down to a lot of, you needed to memorize 4 of these power functions. And, okay, sorry, give me just a second. This didn't send this correctly from the internet. But the power series for e to the x, sine x, cosine x, and 1 over 1 plus x. Those are 4 that you do need to memorize for your AP exam. And those are also very useful in section 10.15, the last of the ones, the last of the BC stuff. So, again, I don't know if it will be next class because I want to see what kind of questions y'all have and how close we are to it. I don't want to rush you, but we do need to try to pick up and recover a little bit from my time off. So one of the things I will put on the quiz is asking you to tell me what those 4 things are, so making sure that you have those memorized. So I'm being transparent with that. That's going to be a point or 2, just making sure you have them memorized, and you need to have them memorized anyway. So if you haven't memorized them, that should go to your top of your list. And then again, when we get to that, whether that's next class or the class after, we'll just wait and see how far we get with this shortened schedule. I'll pick one of the questions that comes straight from this homework practice, so you can just kind of scan those back over, and if you feel good with all of those, one of them will be exactly from that, so that can be a gimme if you're willing to look it over again and maybe re-practice the ones you struggled with the first time. And then I'll pick out just one AP question for just like a point or something, so you can see the different difficulty. Okay, so here's what I was talking about, the memorize. Specifically, I'm interested in just this part, the series expansion. So, as you worked through this assignment, you saw that you pretty much needed this, well, probably for every question, but sine and cosine are kind of similar, so those are 2 ones that are easy to mix up. I actually re-practiced these recently once I started feeling a little bit better, and there was a couple questions within 10.14 and 10.15 that I just switched these 2, so I just did everything kind of off and I had to rework the whole questions. But the way I remember this, and this may not be helpful to you, but in pre-calculus we talked about even and odd functions. Sine is an odd function and cosine is an even function. And so that's personally how I remember sine is the odd stuff. X to the first plus x to the third over 3 factorial plus x to the 5th over 5 factorial, etc. And cosine's the even one, so that's 1. Oh, I'm sorry, these alternate too. One minus x squared over 2 factorial plus x to the 4th over 4 factorial plus or minus. But it has, sine's the odd function, so it has the odd exponents, the odd factorial denominators, and cosine's the even function, it has the even exponents and the even factorials. Again, if you mix those up, then a lot of times you just have to kind of restart. So, and then 1 over 1 plus x was 1 minus x plus x squared minus x cubed plus dot dot dot. And of course you can continue those patterns. So one thing in 10.15, they ask you to try to write some series notation, and I feel like that takes a little bit of practice, and I feel like after you get that practice, you can just kind of look at these and try to make those series notations. That's why I don't think it's really worth memorizing that part at this point. Of course, if you do, it might come in handy occasionally, but it's not necessary. This is the stuff You cannot survive 10.14 and 10.15 without memorizing these two, or these four. Yeah.
For the quiz, do we need to memorize the thing at like the end of the dot dot dot, like
Oh, no.
the formula?
No.
Or no. Okay.
I would like on the quiz for you to put the dot 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 to show that you know it continues, but no, I'm just this. So this is enough to be able to survive the start of some of these questions. Now again, I have no idea which ones worked out for you guys, which ones didn't, where you hit roadblocks. So I would like maybe to field a few questions, maybe something from early in the practice assignment. I know you should have the first few done just from the notes video when they go over it. But I don't know, maybe questions 1 or 2. Did y'all get stuck on either of those first two? We could look at one of those as a reminder or as an example of how you use this and apply it to get your answers. I know your stuff's on notebook paper, so I'll give you a couple minutes to make sure you look that over.
You think you could do 2?
Yeah. Okay, so he's asking for this one. All right, so it appears most of these questions are going to be centered around x equals 0, which is kind of nice because it makes some of the messiness of these questions work out okay. And it's also pretty common to ask for the first 3 or 4 non-zero terms. But when you look at this, compare that to the 4 that you're supposed to memorize, and this one's obviously closest to what?
Sine of x.
Okay, so do yourself a favor and just, even though you should have it memorized, or you will have it memorized, go ahead and write it out so that you have a visual to compare it to. It alternates. Sine is an odd function, so it's the odd exponents and the odd factorial denominators. Okay, and then we just need to take a couple steps to adjust this from sine x equals to x sine of 3x. So, I don't know, let's do sine of 3x first. What's the difference between sine x and sine 3x? Alright, so everywhere there is an x, I'm instead going to put a 3x. So if you have this memorized, x becomes 3x. This is going to be 3x cubed. I'm going to write it as 3 cubed x cubed, personally. This would be 3 to the 5th, x to the 5th. This would be 3 to the 7th times x to the 7th. Dot, dot, dot. Now, the reason why, like, I know 3 to the 3rd is 27. I know 3 factorial is 6. If you need to reduce this a little bit for like a multiple choice question, then of course do that. But some of these numbers are going to be so big that you might as well just leave it as the exponents. So, are you okay with how I made that switch? Okay, so we just got to go one more step with it. Now, I really wanted to know x sine of 3x. So basically, I'm just going to multiply everything by x. So 3x squared minus 3 to the 3rd x to the 4th over 3 factorial plus 3 to the 5th x to the 6th over 5 factorial minus 3 to the 7th x to the 8th over 7 factorial. Dot, dot, dot. And I don't really need the dot, dot, dot here because it says write the first 4 terms first 4 non-zero terms. So there's the first 4 non-zero terms. So again, if you have the sine one memorized, the work isn't really as bad as it seems. And that's how some of these are a little trickier, but a lot of them kind of have a similar feel to them. Start with the memorization one, and then make some adjustments till you get to that. Okay, was anybody else going to ask about number 2? Want to say something else before we move on? Okay. All right, maybe look over questions 1 and 3, see if you would like to discuss one of those. Again, some of these, like if you had trouble with number 2, there's a good chance you might have had the same problem with question 1, but it's pretty much the same thing. You pick out one of the 4 you're supposed to have memorized, make a change to make it closer, make another change to make it closer, and just keep up with the messiness of the question, and you should stumble upon what you're supposed to end up with. Actually, our first period today may not be too short since it's centered around lunchtime. I can't tell. I know your 3rd and 5th and 7th are a little bit shorter, but first may not be. Okay, so you all okay with that number 2? It's really not terrible. If you glance at the answer, it looks like it's going to be terrible, but process isn't too bad. Okay, how about number 1 or number 3? Either one of those sound better than the other? Mason?
Number 1.
Sure. And again, I am going to try to record all of these questions today so that if you need to hear it another time, that it will be on the website probably tomorrow. So, okay, so similar to question 2, question 1, centered around 0. It gives us something that's similar to one of the 4 we're supposed to memorize. Instead of just listing out the first 4 non-zero terms, it just wants to know in the end what's being multiplied by x to the 6th. So I wish there was a nice little trick that we could do that, but unfortunately we just kind of have to dig in and work it the long way. And by that I mean, when you look at this function, what is this closest to of the 4 you have to memorize?
E to the x.
Okay, so e to the x. Even if you have it memorized, go ahead and write it down so that you have the visual in front of you. And then we're just going to try to make a couple changes. I mean, I guess if you're super brave, maybe you could do it in one step, but I'm not brave enough for that. So I am going to do e to the 2x squared. So basically anywhere there was an x, I'm going to change it to a 2x squared. So no x here, this becomes 2x squared. When I plug it in here and square it, this becomes a 2 squared, and then x to the 4th, x squared squared, multiply. And when I plug it in here, I get 2 to the 3rd times x to the 6th. Again, I know what 2 squared is and I know what 2 to the 3rd is, but oftentimes these numbers get so big that you can't do them anyway, so I'm just going to leave it like that. It also kind of helps you see a little bit of a pattern and make sure that you're being consistent with the pattern. Okay, the only other thing to get to their function is multiply by a half, which is the same as dividing by 2. So divide this in half, divide this in half, divide this in half, just divide everything in half, and now you can see the power series for the function they want you to have. And now you can worry about what they want. If they want the first four non-zero terms, there they are. The whole thing here would be your answer besides the dot, dot, dot. But this particular question wants to know the coefficient of x to the sixth. So here, now I can see x to the sixth. So remember, coefficient just means the thing that you're multiplying by x to the sixth. So as a free response question, since you don't have to do any arithmetic, I would just write it out and circle it and be done. As a multiple choice question, they're probably going to simplify this a little bit. They're probably going to call this 8. What is 3 factorial?
6.
Okay, good. And reduce
3/4.
2/3.
2/3. And then that's correct. So again, if you have the 4 memorized and you can write them out correctly, and then slowly and carefully with your work make the incremental changes to what function they have. The work is very scary looking, but the process is usually like this. So, all right, is that enough for you, Mason? Okay. Is somebody else going to ask about one? Want to say anything else before we move on? Okay, so again, I'm not saying every single question in this assignment was like that, but I'd say 90-95% of your process and work is the same idea. Start with the thing you have memorized, make the changes to get to where you want, and then worry about what part of the answer that they want. Okay, let me give you a minute to maybe scan over questions 3, 4, and 5. And see if you'd like to talk about any of those. Now again, you might have struggled with them a little bit at first, but if you see that you think you can do it now, you might hold off. Like I think 5 was a lot easier for me than number 4, but I have no preference. It's whatever y'all think will help you the most. So, and of course, with it goes without saying, if you feel really comfortable with this 10.14 and you put in a good effort and you checked your answers and you feel great about this, you're more than welcome to tune me out here and be looking at your 10.15 or your 10.13 or just wherever you're at. I would prefer you to get the most use out of today's class. So. Okay, so how about 3, 4, or 5? Number 4? Sure. So number 4 does have the same kind of process as 1 and 2. I just thought it was a little bit harder of a function to get to. So when I look at number 4, within this mess of stuff, I see the e to the x. So I'm going to look it up because I don't want to get it wrong and spend too much time on it, but we need to memorize this guy. He does not alternate like the sine and cosine power functions. Okay, so I know I need this. I also need e to the negative x. So of course, that's the exact same thing as e to the x, but everywhere there's an x, you replace with the negative x. So this becomes negative x. What about this? Does this become minus? Good, because if you square a negative, it stays positive anyway. If you put in a negative x here, how about that one? If it's to an odd power, it will change sign. Okay, and then if I have these two in front of me, I can worry about, I'll try to color coordinate this for you. I'll worry about the 1/2 and the second, but I want to add these things together. So e to the x plus e to the negative x, I'm almost like taking this stuff plus this stuff. That's how I'm visualizing it. So 1 plus 1, and x minus an x goes to 0, so I'm not going to write that. I've got 1x squared over 2 factorial plus 1x squared over 2 factorial, which means I've got 2x squareds over 2 factorial. I've got 2 of those. Got 1 of these, subtract 1 of these, so that goes to 0. So I'm not going to write that one. And so I noticed that this said write the first 4 non-zero terms, and I could see that since 2 of these went to 0, I'm just missing too much stuff. So I went back up here and I expanded this a little bit. So if you memorize this pattern, again, you can kind of see this was like x to the 0, x to the first, x squared, x to the third. So this one would be x to the fourth. 0 factorial, 1 factorial, 2 factorial, 3 factorial. So this would be 4 factorial. So even though I don't really memorize it that far out, it's pretty easy to adapt it as needed. Same idea over here. X to the 0, x to the first, x squared, x to the third. So this would be x to the fourth. 0 factorial, 1 factorial, 2 factorial, 3 factorial, 4 factorial. Sounds like a Dr. Seuss thing. Okay, and then these alternate, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. So I'll write out a couple more terms because I think I need a couple more to get 4 terms in the end. So these went to 0. I've got 2 of these guys. They happen to be x to the fourth over 4 factorials. These add to 0, so that's unfortunate here. So I guess I don't remember, but I guess maybe I went out one more time. X to the 6 factorial plus x to the 6 over 6 factorial means I've got 2x to the 6 over 6 factorial. So that's pretty tedious, but again, it's not that difficult if you have the first part memorized correctly. Okay, I don't want to do a whole nother line here, but there's still one more part to this. I need to multiply all this by a half, which is the same as dividing everything by 2. So I'm going to divide this by 2, divide this and this by 2. And so it wants us to write the first 4 non-zero terms. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is perfectly acceptable for a free response question. If it was multiple choice, you might want to do a little bit of arithmetic here. This would be 4, 2 over 4 is a half. So they might write it like that. 4 factorial is 24. These cancel, so I don't know. Like 1/24 x to the fourth, I think, if I'm doing that correctly. These could cancel. 6 factorial is
1,028.
7,000.
1,028.
I don't know. On my work, I just left it 6 factorial. So anyway, you might have to simplify some of these fractions to be able to match it to the correct multiple choice, but you can do that as needed, of course. As long as you know what a factorial is, the most important part is that you've got all the numbers there correctly. So again, the only thing that makes this one harder is you have to write out e to the x, you've got to adjust e to the negative x, you've got to add those together, you've got to divide both sides by 2, and so there's just a million places for you to make small careless mistakes. So try to make your work as nice and neat and clean so that you don't miss it for unfortunate reasons. Okay, is that good enough? You all right with that? Okay, I'm gonna give you a minute to give you an opportunity to maybe ask about, again, it's all pretty much the same type of process for the most part. I think there was maybe one or two that were on the harder side. I would say this was probably one of those. Question 16, they kind of mix it in with some old calculus stuff like tangent line equation. But for the most part, the rest of them are just practicing doing the same process. So, but I'll give you a minute. We did not work question 3, so see if you'd like me to talk about 3, 5, or 6. Again, I'm giving you some time here because I know your work's on notebook paper and it's a little less organized. So, did I miss anything while I was gone? Was there any excitement or?
Oh yeah.
Oh, is that from first period?
Yeah.
Me and Brendan drew that.
Some of these numbers up there too.
I was wondering who put their phone number up there.
I think it was Johnny.
Did y'all have?
Do you think you could show number 3? I struggled on that one.
Yeah. Of course. Okay, so if you look at number 3, which one of the 4 things you're supposed to 4 power series you're supposed to memorize does it look closest to?
1 over 1 plus x.
Okay, so we're going to memorize that, and we are going to write it down so we have a reference here. Okay, what's the difference? Ignore the square for a second. What's the difference between this and 1 over 1 minus x?
Just adding x.
Subtracting x rather than add.
Okay, so everywhere there was an x, they replaced it with a negative x, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to do the exact same thing. Everywhere there's an x, I'm going to replace it with a negative x. Now be careful here, negative x squared is still going to be positive, so negative x here gives you a negative x cubed times another negative. So you do have to be careful with those exponents. If you raise something to an even exponent like 2, it'll always be positive. If you raise something to an odd exponent, a negative something to an odd exponent, it will become negative. And if it's negative of something negative, it becomes positive. So, okay. So, I guess the next thing I thought about is this was supposed to be, this is like 1 over 1 minus x times 1 over 1 minus x. See how these are the same? Okay, so if I know what 1 minus x looks like, I'm really taking this and I'm going to multiply it by itself. So we could do 1 times all of these. Now, obviously this goes on forever, so we're not going to multiply by everything, but we're going to write it by several. We just need to make sure we get the first 4 terms right. So 1 times these things would be a 1, an x squared, and an x cubed. And then, like FOIL, take the next thing and multiply it by everything. So multiply x by all of these, and I'm going to line it up down here where these match up because that's going to make it a little bit easier. X times 1, x times x times x squared, x times x cubed. Okay, and then distribute your x squared to all of these. And sorry, I didn't really save myself enough space here. Maybe distribute this x cubed to all of these. 1x cubed, 1x to the 4th, 1x to the 5th. I don't know. And then I kind of stopped caring because I really only need the first 4 terms. So for my constants, I've got a 1. For my x's, I've got 2 of them. And this is why I lined them up this way. It just made it a little bit more manageable for me. For my x squareds, I've got 3 of them. And for my x cubes, I've got 4 of them. And since it wanted the first 4 non-zero terms, I can stop there. There's the first 4. So I did a little bit more than I needed to, but I wasn't quite sure how much I needed. So. I'd say that one's a little bit harder to adapt as well. So it's not too hard to see that this was closest to 1 over 1 plus x, but switching it to this and then thinking of it as multiplying it by itself being equivalent to that, and then thinking to multiply those was the process. Braden, how'd you do? You did good? You don't have any questions on any of the first several?
Not the first couple ones.
Okay.
I don't have any questions, so I checked my answers and I understood why I cut them.
Okay. Good deal. Okay, so since we've taken some questions from the first part and we just kind of touched on the basis here, again, a lot of the questions are similar to this, so I really feel like if you retry some of those, you'll be okay. But I'm perfectly happy to answer any of the questions you have, but I'll open it up to any part of the assignment. So if you didn't have problems until question 11 or 12 or 13 or something like that, here's your chance to get some help.
Can you do question 11?
Uh-huh. Let's see what 11 was. Yeah, I marked 11 as one that I also struggled with a little bit. So let me think about what I did here. I did it, I just marked it as one that I had a harder time with. Okay, I know that this is similar to the sine power function. And I think I was able to catch that because of these denominators. 3 factorial, 5 factorial, 7 factorial. Okay, so here's what I think I did, and again, this one was a little bit harder for me to figure out. But if I compared this to sine, part of the sine piece should be a minus x cubed divided by 3 factorial. And I'm kind of splitting this fraction up a little bit, because you can see this 1 over 3 factorial, that's how, and then the 1 over 5 factorial, 1 over 7 factorial, which is how I had an idea that it had something to do with sine and not something else. And then right here, this was supposed to be x cubed, and this said x squared. So I believe x to be pi over 2, but they were dividing by that as well. So if I take this and plug it in here, that's like sine of pi over 2. But again, this really should be like pi over 2 to the third, and the fact that it's pi over 2 squared means that they were dividing everything by pi over 2. And that was not intuitive for me, at least. And of course it's consistent with the other terms as well, so if you continue to do that, but this is where the answer comes from. Sine at pi over 2, unit circle question, dividing by pi over 2 is the same as multiplying by 2 over pi. So that's how you get to the answer. But you have to be super familiar with the sine power function to be able to hope to see that this was sine and not cosine, not e to the x, any of that other stuff. So that's what I would do for that one. But if I remember right, I think that's the only question that I marked as one that I wanted to look back at myself personally from this lesson. It was the only one that I felt took a little more brain power to see how to start it. Not that any of the other questions are easier, but I feel like a lot of the other questions are at least easier to start. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys keep looking. Just tell me when you find something and I'll go over it with you on the board. I'll be ready at any time. Okay, nothing, still nothing y'all found that I can help with yet?
16A.
Number what? 16A? Okay. Okay, I got a question about 16A. So this one was kind of a little bit of a throwback from AB, the equation of a tangent line. So remember, tangent lines are always linear, and an easy way to write the equation of a linear line is to just start off in point slope form, where x1, y1 is the point and m is the slope. So for A, they give you this point right here. When x is 0, y is 2. So plug in 2 for y and 0 for x. And then the slope, remember slope means the same as derivative. So you need to use the derivative, and you only care about the slope or the derivative when x is 0, because you're only interested in the tangent line at that instant. So if you plug that in, it's the same as f of 0 plus 1. Just made all the x's 0. So once again, f of 0 was 2. So it looks like the derivative at 0 was 3. And derivative is the same thing as slope. So there is your equation. Subtracting 0 doesn't do anything, and I guess you can add the 2 over if you feel like it, but it's not a requirement. Okay, let me leave that there for a moment. If you see something about that you want to ask, I'd be happy to address it. Okay. I'm assuming that one's okay if you wanted to ask about it.
Really? More than the 10.15? I thought it was easier after this one. but-
I didn't look that very hard, to be honest.
Okay, again, I'm gonna try not to bug y'all by asking you for questions every 2 minutes, so I'm just counting on y'all to tell me.
I can't erase its color pencil.
Here's the libraries.
Are you in a class
This
one?
one. Or this
I agree. I did AP last year, but
All I did was visual art appreciation. I still like.
Here's all my
that's
erasers.
fair.
But we still did some stuff.
This
We
is
didn't,
all out of the way.
cause I know some classes just like watch movies first, so we did some stuff.
I've always liked art classes.
Okay, so to go back to the agenda for today, again, my plan initially was to kind of field these questions, try to help you guys out with this 10.14, maybe not help you finish it. Some of these you probably still need to go back and retry now that you've maybe have a little better understanding. So I would like to go on to 10.15, but just because we have time, and maybe do some of the same stuff with it. However, just looking at the schedule, my other BC class today is gonna have a lot less time than y'all. So just to keep y'all on the same pace, I won't move on to 10.15. So I would say try to use this time to make sure that you have this assignment finished so you can get those. Obviously, I'm gonna give you points for everything. I will warn you before I ask you to turn anything in. The only thing I will ask for next class is this assignment. So make sure you have it finished. Even though I'm not going to throw the quiz at you next class because I don't know if my 5th period will have enough time, I will quiz you the class after, making sure that you've memorized those 4 power series. I'll pick one question from this assignment, word for word, the same thing. So if you feel good with all of them, great. If you feel good with all of them except for a couple, then maybe repractice those couple between then, now and then. And I'll do like a 1 point AP question over this topic. So.
And actually, I made it sound like we had a lot of time. It looks like our lunch starts at 1:05, which is about 13 minutes from now, so there probably wasn't time to move on anyway, I just wasn't aware. So, obviously I want you to be as comfortable as possible with all the stuff that you guys missed, but at the very least, just trying to make sure we're all on the same place and on the same page. 10.14 is the one I need you to feel extra good about by Monday. This is a B week, so I won't see you again.